Titus, from the Lives of the 12 Caesars, by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Leeson. The Lives of the 12 Caesars, by Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, translated by Alexander Thompson and edited by T. Forrester. Titus, paragraphs 1 through 11. Titus, who had the same cognomen with his father, was the darling and delight of mankind, so much did the natural genius, address, or good fortune he possessed tend to conciliate the favour of all. This was, indeed, extremely difficult after he became emperor, as before that time, and even during the reign of his father, he lay under public odium and censure. He was born upon the 3rd of the calends of January, in the year remarkable for the death of Caius, near the Septizonium, in a mean house and a very small and dark room, which still exists and is shown to the curious. He was educated in the palace with Britannicus, and instructed in the same branches of learning, and under the same masters. During this time, they say, that a physiognomist being introduced by Narcissus, the freedman of Claudius, to examine the features of Britannicus, positively affirmed that he would never become emperor, but that Titus, who stood by, would. They were so familiar, that Titus, being next him at table, is thought to have tasted of the fatal potion which put an end to Britannicus' life, and to have contracted from it a distemper which hung about him a long time. In remembrance of all these circumstances, he afterwards erected a golden statue of him in the Palatium, and dedicated to him an equestrian statue of ivory, attending it in the Circensian procession, in which it is still carried to this day. While yet a boy, he was remarkable for his noble endowments both of body and mind, and as he advanced in years they became still more conspicuous. He had a fine person, combining an equal mixture of majesty and grace, was very strong, though not tall, and somewhat corpulent. Gifted with an excellent memory, and a capacity for all the arts of peace and war, he was a perfect master of the use of arms and riding. Very ready in the Latin and Greek tongues, both in verse and prose; and such was the facility he possessed in both, that he would harangue and versify extempore. Nor was he unacquainted with music, but could both sing and play upon the harp sweetly and scientifically. I have likewise been informed by many persons that he was remarkably quick in writing shorthand, would in merriment and jest engage with his secretaries in the imitation of any handwriting he saw, and often say, that he was admirably qualified for forgery. He filled with distinction the rank of a military tribune both in Germany and Britain, in which he conducted himself with the utmost activity, and no less modesty and reputation, as appears evident from the great number of statues with honourable inscriptions erected to him in various parts of both those provinces. After serving in the wars, he frequented the courts of law, but with less assiduity than applause. About the same time he married Aricidia, the daughter of Tertullus, who was only a knight, but had formerly been prefect of the Praetorian Guards. After her decease he married Marcia Furnilla, of a very noble family, but afterwards divorced her, taking from her the daughter he had by her. Upon the expiration of his quaestorship he was raised to the rank of commander of a legion, and took the 2 strong cities of Tarichaea and Gamala in Judea; and having his horse killed under him in a battle, he mounted another, whose rider he had encountered and slain. Soon afterwards, when Galba came to be emperor, he was sent to congratulate him, and turned the eyes of all people upon himself, wherever he came; it being the general opinion amongst them, that the emperor had sent for him with a design to adopt him for his son. But finding all things again in confusion, he turned back upon the road, and going to consult the oracle of Venus at Paphos about his voyage, he received assurances of obtaining the empire for himself. These hopes were speedily strengthened, and being left to finish the reduction of Judea, in the final assault of Jerusalem he slew 7 of its defenders, with the like number of arrows, and took it upon his daughter's birthday. So great was the joy and attachment of the soldiers, that in their congratulations they unanimously saluted him by the title of emperor, and upon his quitting the province soon afterwards, would needs have detained him, earnestly begging him, and that not without threats, either to stay, or take them all with him. This occurrence gave rise to the suspicion of his being engaged in a design to rebel against his father, and claim for himself the government of the East. And the suspicion increased, when on his way to Alexandria, he wore a diadem at the consecration of the ox Apis at Memphis; and though he did it only in compliance with an ancient religious usage of the country, yet there was some who put a bad construction upon it. Making therefore what haste he could into Italy, he arrived first at Rhegium, and sailing thence in a merchant ship to Puteoli, went to Rome with all possible expedition. Presenting himself unexpectedly to his father, he said, by way of contradicting the strange reports raised concerning him, "I am come, father, I am come." From that time he constantly acted as colleague with his father, and indeed as regent of the empire. He triumphed with his father, bore jointly with him the office of censor, and was besides his colleague not only in the tribunician authority, but in 7 consulships. Taking upon himself the care and inspection of all offices, he dictated letters, wrote proclamations in his father's name, and pronounced his speeches in the Senate in place of the quaestor. He likewise assumed the command of the Praetorian Guards, although no one but a Roman knight had ever before been their prefect. In this he conducted himself with great haughtiness and violence, taking off without scruple or delay all those he had most reason to suspect, after he had secretly sent his emissaries into the theatres and camp to demand, as if by general consent, that the suspected persons should be delivered up to punishment. Among these he invited to supper A. Caecina, a man of consular rank, whom he ordered to be stabbed at his departure, immediately after he had gone out of the room. To this act, indeed, he was provoked by an imminent danger, for he had discovered a writing under the hand of Caecina, containing an account of a plot hatched among the soldiers. By these acts, though he provided for his future security, yet for the present he so much incurred the hatred of the people, that scarcely ever any one came to the empire with a more odious character, or more universally disliked. Besides his cruelty, he lay under the suspicion of giving way to habits of luxury, as he often prolonged his revels till midnight with the most riotous of his acquaintance. Nor was he unsuspected of lewdness, on account of the swarms of catamites and eunuchs about him, and his well-known attachment to Queen Bernice, who received from him, as it is reported, a promise of marriage. He was supposed, besides, to be of a rapacious disposition. For it is certain, that in causes which came before his father, he used to offer his interest for sale, and took bribes. In short, people publicly expressed an unfavourable opinion of him, and said he would prove another Nero. This prejudice, however, turned out in the end to his advantage, and enhanced his praises to the highest pitch when he was found to possess no vicious propensities, but, on the contrary, the noblest virtues. His entertainments were agreeable rather than extravagant, and he surrounded himself with such excellent friends, that the succeeding princes adopted them as most serviceable to themselves and the state. He immediately sent away Bernice from the city, much against both their inclinations. Some of his old eunuchs, though such accomplished dancers that they bore an uncontrollable sway upon the stage, he was so far from treating with any extraordinary kindness, that he would not so much as witness their performances in the crowded theatre. He violated no private right, and if ever man refrained from injustice, he did; nay, he would not accept of the allowable and customary offerings. Yet in munificence he was inferior to none of the princes before him. Having dedicated his amphitheatre, and built some warm baths close by it with great expedition, he entertained the people with most magnificent spectacles. He likewise exhibited a naval fleet in the old Naumachia, besides a combat of gladiators, and in one day brought into the theatre 5,000 wild beasts of all kinds. He was by nature extremely benevolent. For whereas all the emperors after Tiberius, according to the example he had set them, would not admit the grants made by former princes to be valid unless they received their own sanction, he confirmed them all by one general edict, without waiting for any applications respecting them. Of all who petitioned for any favour, he sent none away without hopes. And when his ministers represented to him that he promised more than he could perform, he replied, No one ought to go away downcast from an audience